I want to ask a musical question. A musical question. I want to ask you about a song that I guarantee that you know, but you may not know it by its proper title. So I want a show of hands, all here who know the song or have heard the tune called The March of the Swiss Soldiers. The March of the Swiss Soldiers. Okay? Well, I guarantee you know this song, because it's by a composer by the name of Rossini, who wrote a piece of music in which the March of the Swiss Soldiers is contained, and it's called the William Tell Overture. Who knows the William Tell Overture? Okay, we have a few more. Now, the rest of you will know this when I tell you it was the theme song to The Lone Ranger. Hi-ho, Silver. What in the world is he talking about? Where is this going? Well, does anybody remember the name of the Lone Ranger's horse? Silver. And more importantly, what kind of bullets did the Lone Ranger use? Silver bullets. And so today we're going to talk about a silver bullet that people think is in the Bible, but is really actually not. The Lone Ranger was perhaps the most successful radio and later TV drama that there was. And it was created by a woman, and her name was Fran Stryker. And the radio program began in 1933. And by 1939, there were 20 million people in the United States that listened every week to the Lone Ranger. And all the episodes on the radio from 1933 until the TV series started, I think in 1949. She wrote 2,670 episodes of The Lone Ranger. But she was driven by a concept that she rolled out in 1933 before any episode was ever aired. And she put it in the form of a poem, and it's called The Code of the Lone Ranger. The Code of the Lone Ranger. Now, as Christians, we cannot embrace all these concepts, but I can assure you, the Lone Ranger epitomized a moral standard that we no longer find in America. Listen to the poem. I believe to have a friend, one must be one. I believe that all men are created equal and that everyone has within himself the power to make this a better world. I believe that God put the firewood there, but that every man must gather and light it himself. I believe in being prepared physically, mentally, and morally to fight when necessary for what is right. I believe that a man should make the most of what equipment he has. I believe that, quote, this government of the people, by the people, and for the people, end quote, shall live always. I believe that men should live by the rule of what is best for the greatest number. I believe that sooner or later, somewhere, somehow, we must settle with the world and make a payment for what we have taken. I believe that all things change but truth, and that truth alone lives on forever. I believe in my Creator, my country, and my fellow man. That's from Wikipedia is where I copied that. But that was in Fran Stryker's mind, the model for the Lone Ranger that was on radio and TV from 1933 to 1957. Now, the TV portion, 221 episodes were filmed. The radio portion, 2,670 episodes were aired. Not only that, there were 18 novels, 18 Lone Ranger novels published by Moonstone Books, and there were 13 novels published by Big Little Books. And one of these books that was published in 1946 is one of the points that we want to make this morning in our lesson. And the name of that book was The Lone Ranger and the Silver Bullets. You see, it has a lot to do with a misapplication of today's text. Our text today is found in the book of Luke, chapter 6, 35 to 38. So if you'll turn with me, we'll read our text and we'll talk briefly about its misapplication, but the focus is going to be the true meaning and the true application of this passage. Luke chapter 6. 35 to 38. But love your enemies and do good, and when expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use it, it will be measured back to you. People read this passage and they somehow think, if I'm a good person, quote unquote, God's going to stuff my bank account full of money. This passage has absolutely nothing to do with your bank account or money. Now, will God bless you? Will you find prosperity? Perhaps. But there's no quid pro quo. There's no Faustian bargain with God that if you do this, he's going to do that. And if you're a good person, he's going to make you rich. This, sadly, is the proof text of many a prosperity gospel preacher. You've heard it talked about as seed money. You give me $1,000 and God's going to park a Cadillac in your driveway. No. This passage has absolutely nothing to do with its meaning. Such an application is a gross misunderstanding and twisting of the passage. The passage has nothing to do at all with wealth accumulation. People see it as a silver bullet. Just what is a silver bullet? It's a phrase that we hear a lot. And we heard it a lot with the Lone Ranger. You see, the Lone Ranger used his silver bullets to deter evil in the world. He was the best shot there ever was. Every episode on TV, you would see the Lone Ranger take his gun out and he would shoot silver bullets at all the evil and wicked bad guys, and he never drew an ounce of blood. He was such a good shot, he would just like shoot the gun out of the hand of the bad guy. The bad guy, you remember, he would just hold his wrist and he'd kind of fall to the ground, but he never got really hurt. The silver bullet. It's a great concept, but it was fiction. Far from reality, but people think, I need a silver bullet. I need a silver bullet to make me, you fill in the blank. So just what is a silver bullet? According to phrases.org/UK, a silver bullet is a direct and effortless solution to a problem. Now, isn't that what people are looking for today? They want this great solution to a great problem, but they don't want to have it with any effort, pain, agony, discomfort, or even interruption. They want to snap their finger and have it occur magically. Now, this saying is derived from the widespread myth that only a silver bullet can kill werewolves and the like. That's also from the same source. And the myth that silver can slay adversaries from the other world may have first been conceived by Horace in his Odes, where the Oracle of Delphi allegedly told Philip of Macedonia to, quote, fight with silver spears, end quote. That's also from the Phrases website. But silver bullets, however, are most linked in popular culture, as we've said, to the Lone Ranger, who rides to the William Tell Overture. Now, I'm not going to attempt to replicate that tune, but I know it's in your head right now. So what is the clear bottom line? The clear bottom line is the silver bullet is from the passage, from the meaning of Christ to his audience. Give away what you need most, and we will receive what we need the most and more. And what is that? Salvation. We must give away the aspects, the biblical aspects of salvation to others in order to receive it ourselves. Jesus said a number of things. He said that my words will judge you on the last day. And we are shown, as it were, the day of judgment. And Jesus is judging the nations by what standard? By what you have done or not done to the least of these, my brethren. Now you might ask, well, what does that mean? Well, this passage fleshes that out with meaning. In chapter 6, verse 35 of Luke, we see the main focus, the main subject that Jesus addresses in this passage, and it's a simple 3-word command. Love your enemies. Proverbs 19, verse 17 says this, that kindness to the poor is a loan to the Lord, and he will repay the lender. And again in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 27, he says, whoever gives to the poor will not be in need, but he who hides his eyes will receive many curses. Micah chapter 6, verse 8 says, he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And Jesus re-articulates this passage in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. love your enemies. How do you love your enemies? It's by doing what is just. It is by loving kindness and walking humbly before God. But what does that mean? What does it mean to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly before God? In this text, Jesus tells us. This passage that we just read is oftentimes called the Sermon on the Plain. Verse 17 tells us Jesus found a flat, wide open space in which to teach the multitudes. It is Luke's rendition of the Beatitudes of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Jesus is teaching the Jews how to live under the oppression of Rome, as well as adversaries in general. And the text is summarized, as we said, as love your enemies. Now, how, according to the text, does one love his enemies? How does one show mercy, kindness, and justice? Well, there's 4 ways that Jesus says to love your enemies. First of all, in the text, is we are to show goodness to our enemies. Number 2, we are to show mercy to our enemies. Number 3, we are to show charity to our enemies. And number 4, the most difficult of all, we are to show forgiveness to our enemies. Now, who is an enemy? In Jesus' case, they were his plotting murderers. These people were plotting to murder Jesus at the first moment they could. And Jesus is talking about proactively being good to them, proactively showing them mercy, proactively showing them charity, and proactively showing them forgiveness. And so, as Christians, we are tellers, as it were, in the bank of God. Tellers in the bank of God. In God's bank, things are done differently. In the world's bank, the bankers we're on to oftentimes are more like Mr. Potter in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know how Mr. Potter ever made any money because he never loaned anything to anybody. That's kind of the world's attitude. You have to prove it to me that you're worthy of my kindness. Not in the bank of God. The tellers in the bank of God are told to give out the wealth to anyone who comes and asks. And their credentials don't matter at all. You could be a murderer of Jesus and still get a loan from the bank of God. So how does that work in the bank of God? As tellers of God's bank, we are to dispense the currency of God. God in this passage has 4 currencies he wants us to hand out freely to anyone who needs. First of all, goodness. What does the currency of goodness look like in reality? Well, it looks like this. To treat others with the mind of God, not your own, for there is none good but God. We're to dispense goodness, but it can't be our own goodness because we don't have any to give. We're handing out somebody else's goodness, someone else's currency, someone else's money. We're giving out the goodness of God. because we don't have any. The next currency in the bank of God is mercy. We have to give out the currency of God of mercy. What does that mean when we are dealing with an enemy? An enemy is an adversary. An enemy is someone who wishes ill against us. An enemy is someone who does good not at all towards us. An enemy does evil towards us. An enemy hates us. An enemy despises us. An enemy talks evil of us. An enemy plots against us. They stay awake at night thinking of ways to hurt us. But what are we to dispense to such people? Mercy. The currency of mercy. We are to treat them better than they deserve or expect. They're shocked when they mistreat us, and we give them mercy. Mercy is not getting what one deserves. And an enemy thinks they deserve retaliation. And when we, the teller at the bank of God, give mercy instead of retaliation, they're shocked. But we are to also render the currency of God known as charity or love. We are to give the enemy, on behalf of God, the owner of the bank, the benefit of the doubt. Now, I don't know about you, but that was a phrase that my mother used all the time regarding other people. When me or my sister would say anything detrimental about another person, she says, Russell, you need to give them the benefit of the doubt. When I was a kid, I had no idea what that meant. But it's a very, very descriptive phrase. And according to EnglishGrammarLessons.com, the phrase entered first in speech as innocent until proven guilty. In the court of law in the United States of America, it is our abiding principle that no matter what the evidence might appear to be, no matter how solid the case might appear to be, the court, the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney are all going to rule with one principle, and that is the accused is innocent till proven guilty beyond the shadow of a doubt. And that's where the legal term innocent until proven guilty came from. And finally, this phrase, the benefit of the doubt, came into general usage in the 19th century. In other words, what does it mean to give someone the benefit of the doubt? What does it mean to be charitable towards your enemy? Well, it means to assume the best of another instead of the worst of another. That's hard to do. When someone cuts you off in traffic, and it happens an awful lot, we get angry. Now, how could they do that to me? I don't know you. They couldn't possibly be doing it on purpose because they do it to everybody. Don't assume that they're somehow personally victimizing you. It's got nothing to do with you. This is what we need to do. We need to assume the best of another. Well, maybe there's an emergency. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital with a wife that's about to give birth. Maybe there's been a death in the family. Assume the best, not the worst. That's the benefit of the doubt. Be good to others. Be merciful to others. Be charitable to others. But mostly and foremost, forgive. Forgive your enemies as God has forgiven you. That's even in the disciples' prayer. Our forgiveness is predicated on the amount of forgiveness that we give to other people. When you withhold forgiveness to others, your enemies especially, you may just in fact be withholding forgiveness from yourself. God has forgiven us. We must forgive them as Jesus forgave us. And how did Jesus forgive? As he was being murdered on the cross. As his life breath was fleeting, he prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is the standard by which we hand out at the bank of God. As tellers, we hand out goodness, we hand out mercy, we hand out charity, and we hand out forgiveness to all who need it and who doesn't. We all need. Who among us here would say, well, I don't need any more goodness. I don't need any more mercy. I don't need any more charity. I don't need any more forgiveness. No. We need more and more and more. And intuitively, it doesn't make sense, but God says, if you want more goodness, if you want more mercy, if you want more charity, you want more forgiveness, you got to give it out more and more and more. You can't run out. That's what Jesus is teaching here. The more you give goodness, the more you give mercy, the more you give charity, the more you give forgiveness, the more you receive. And the power phrase in this text is, for with the same measure. When God the Father sees that we are dispensing from his bank increasing amounts of mercy, increasing amounts of charity, forgiveness, the more he's going to give to us. And that is the meaning. The bottom line is, as the same action as God through Jesus Christ, sacrificing ourselves on every occasion for the sake of the gospel. And when we do, what will you receive? What does Jesus say? What silly people say means money, means that God is going to press down to its overflowing to us goodness, mercy, charity, and forgiveness. That's the meaning of the passage. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do when we leave here today? The challenge of Jesus is to hand out. Go back to the bank of God. Stand at your teller position and hand out a lot more goodness. Hand out a lot more mercy. Hand out a lot more charity. Hand out a lot more forgiveness. And you'll find that you have received from God more than you handed out. Why does it matter? It matters if I want God to be good to me, if I want God to be merciful to me, if I want God to be charitable towards me, and if I want God to forgive me, I must do so to others for his sake and for the sake of the gospel. And I'll receive what I so desire because I've given it first. What is the most good that we can give? What is the most mercy that we can give? What is the most charity that we can give? And what is the most forgiving thing we can give? It is the saving gospel of Jesus Christ. The saving gospel of Jesus Christ. Repentance and baptism in his name for the forgiveness of sins, to render forgiveness and to render the gift of the Holy Spirit, and for God himself to add us to the church, to put our name in the book of life. That is the best thing we can do for an enemy. It is the most merciful thing that we can do for an enemy. It is the most charitable thing that we can do for an enemy, to give him the forgiveness of God. In other words, what must I do to be saved? The answer to that is the most good, it is the most merciful, it is the most charitable, and it most certainly is the most forgiving gift that you can give to a dying sinner. That is the message. If you're here, you need to respond to the call of God. Won't you come while we stand and sing to encourage you?
What will you do with Jesus?